Come on, Papa Yam, I'm getting on a motorcycle to forget my feelies by popping some wheelies. Why do you need to bring up my fragile and ever-encroaching mortality? I mean, I'm on a motorcycle anyways. I've basically decided to gamble my 70s away on some quick thrills today. Well, my young squidlet, the whole goal here is to keep you from meeting the Reaper any sooner than you need to. Yep, we're going to take a look at some easily overlooked maintenance jobs that you're probably sleeping on right now, shrugging it off with the, it'll be fine, sort of a demeanor of a dad strapping a mattress to the hood of his Kia Optima with bungee cords. The only problem with these maintenance items that you're skipping is at your own risk. These are the most common things that lead to fatal accidents and are completely avoidable with only a few minutes in the garage. Most of the time anyways. Some of them are a total pain in the butt to do, but you should do them anyway. Also, you might notice that none of these things deal with the engine or the transmission. Usually if an engine blows up, you just lose power and come to a stop in a puff of smoke or steam. The only way you'll die is if you took a V-twin rear piston to the nads, or your bike goes supernova, which just doesn't happen all that often. Let's just dive right in with our first and probably most obvious thing, servicing your braking system. There's a handful of things you should be doing here, so let's take the shotgun approach and tackle all of them. First, take a look at your rotors. Do you have any gouges or odd scrapes? If you do, then you probably have a problem with your pads being improperly seated or totally spent. If you're feeling like your brakes are a bit sluggish or less responsive, this is usually the culprit. While you're checking the rotors, you should take a bit of brake cleaner and a rough sponge and clean any glazing off the rotors to keep the surface of the rotors nice and bitey. However, your pads and rotors are not going to cause instant failures. They're wear parts and going to fade over time. The biggest thing to look at are your hoses. Most modern sport bikes are shipping with steel-lined hoses, but if you're rocking an older bike, you probably have rubber. Rubber lines can crack and deform as it ages, and that can create weak points, and those weak points can explode under pressure, and you'll instantly lose all braking force while you're in the middle of slowing down. Yeah, can you see the problem right there? Service your brakes, my dudes. If you decide to not keep your brakes in good shape, you'd better have motorcycle insurance because you are going to need it. If you're riding around on a motorcycle, you've got to have insurance. It's sort of like a law or something, but that doesn't mean it has to be Bubba Tubson's discount totally not a scam insurance because it's cheap. That's right, Progressive offers policies starting as low as $79 a year and roadside assistance starting at $1 a month. Can you believe we've got Progressive as a sponsor? I've seen a lot of comments you guys congratulating us. Thank you. We appreciate it. The only way you can get a cheaper tow is by leaving your bike on the side of the road and hoping that someone comes by and hauls it off to a dump. But with Progressive, they'll haul it away to a mechanic and get it fixed up right using OEM parts, and even replacing up to $3,000 worth of mods with their gear coverage. We've had all the bikes in the fleet covered by Progressive for years now, so you know it's solid. Click the link down below and get yourself a free quote to see how much you can save. If it's more expensive than your current policy, there's no pressure to switch. Just check them out below and get yourself a quote. Sticking with the brakes, don't forget to check and replace your brake fluid. How can this kill you? Well, the same way those faulty hoses can, losing pressure while undergoing hard braking. Let's bring some science into this one. When you increase the pressure of a closed system, you increase the temperature, and your braking system, while not perfectly sealed, is functionally a fixed volume. If you were to use something like water on your brake lines under hard braking, the temperature in the lines would spike well above boiling. And then you'd basically be essentially trying to compress a gas, which won't work in a brake line. That's why we use brake fluid, which has a higher boiling point and is more compressible than water. The only problem is that it degrades over time. Also, remember how I said your brake lines aren't perfectly sealed? It's possible for water to slowly seep into the system over months or years of use. Too much water leads to too little brake feel and stopping power, and you go to the track with crappy fluid, you might find that braking power just nosedives right off a cliff mid-session and you go careening off the track. The best way to avoid this problem is to bleed your brakes. Normally you should be doing this every 2 years, but considering how important brake feel is, not to mention how important stopping your bike is, as well as the low cost of brake fluid, you might as well just do it every year. It's super easy and it only takes a few minutes per caliper. Number 3 on our list of fatal maintenance oversights is to take a look at your throttle. Yep, it's entirely possible that your throttle can get stuck open and you continue to speed up infinitely until you reach warp speed and blast off into the ether and yeet yourself into the sun. That, or you can just pull your clutch in, but if you panic, you might forget that little nugget. If you're on a cable throttle bike, there's a few places to look, even more if you're on a carbureted motorcycle, but let's talk about the most common places. First, check the slack and free play on your throttle cables. Your owner's manual should have a spec for the amount of throttle free play you should have. Too much means that you won't be able to reach full throttle even if you hold the throttle as far open as possible because your cable will be too long. Too little means that your throttle actually never completely closes and your bike will always be revving and won't reach idle. The next thing you should be feeling for is how smooth the throttle opens and closes. If it feels like there's extra friction in the system, pop the throttle tube off the handlebar and make sure that the surface is lubricated. Then make sure to clean and lube your cables. If there's still some extra friction, make sure nothing else is pinching or kinking the cables, or make sure that those bar end weights, mirrors, or bark busters aren't installed too tightly on the throttle. If you're on a ride-by-wire system, you don't have much to service, but it's still worth popping the throttle tube off the handlebar and cleaning and lubing the surface. Number 4, don't forget to service your clutch system. Look, bikes are tough. I mean, look at my race bike. That thing's been through hell and back and it still turns over and just runs. But they're not nearly as tough as cars are. A clutch and a manual transmission car can last over 100,000 miles or more, unless you're doing all those sweet clutch kicks and drifting it out everywhere. Sometimes your car will die before the clutch does. However, on a motorcycle, the clutch is a whole lot smaller and less robust. Wheelies, burnouts, and even general squiddery can kill a clutch pretty quickly. But things like slowly feeding out the clutch lever while holding your throttle open, which by the way is how they teach you to ride a bike in the MSF course, puts undue wear and tear on the clutch. You might notice on a bike that's been ridden hard and put away wet that the clutch starts to slip when you jump on the throttle in higher gears. That's a surefire sign that you need to replace your clutch like 1,000 miles ago. If your clutch is slipping, you'll notice that the bike creeps forward with the clutch pulled in at a stop. This is obviously bad, but how can you improve the lifespan of your clutch? Well, first, stop riding like a squid. Maybe not as much of a squid, but obviously you're not going to do that because it is fun. Instead, make sure you have proper clutch free play dialed in at your lever. Once again, your owner's manual is going to have the exact number, but here's a quick way to do it. Adjust your clutch so that there's a little wobble in the lever. Not much, but just a smidge. That way, when you turn the bike on, pop the bike in gear and pull the lever in and see if it creeps forward. If not, then you're in spec. If your lever is too tight, you won't notice anything other than maybe a little less power. If you have no free play, just dial in and save your clutch. Number 5 is a quick one. Make sure all your lights work. If you don't have any lights on and you're riding at night, the danger is obvious, but let's assume you don't have a functioning blinker. Then you can't tell people you're making a lane change or turning. No brake light means that you can't tell people you're slowing down. They're super easy to check. Just turn the bike on while you're not riding and make sure your headlights and high beams turn on. Make sure your brake lights activate and your blinkers blink. If not, replace the bulb. With your brake lights, make sure that the switches are properly adjusted so they turn on as soon as you grab the lever or push on the pedal, though this is more important for the rear brake. Oh, and before I forget, LED lights can die on you. It just takes a long time. Don't think you're all good just because you have a new bike with LED only lights. Moving right along, we've got number 6. You probably haven't set your suspension sag. How does this one kill you? 2 words, my dude: tank slapper. Improperly set suspension geometry increases your likelihood of experiencing a tank slapper, and we know why those are bad. You hit a thing on the road and your handlebar starts to wobble, and if your setup is bad enough, it just builds and builds and builds and builds and leads to you becoming a stain on the pavement. Quick tip: if you experience a tank slapper, the best thing to do is roll off the throttle and hold the bars loosely. Clamping down on the bars trying to stop them from wobbling just sends all the force down to the tire and then to you high siding. Remember guys, the bike wants to stay upright. It is a gyroscope. It wants to stay upright. Don't fight it. But let's talk about how to avoid it all together. It's simple. Just set your suspension sag. Once again, there's a magic number in your owner's manual as well as a walkthrough on how to do it. Plenty of videos on YouTube about it. It's a pretty simple process, but you need a second hand unless you have a special tool. You can also do it with a video camera and a stand-up ruler. There's a couple ways to do it, but it's a pretty simple process. You got to make sure you have enough preload dialed in to make your suspension geometry work the way it's meant to and can work at its best. Not only will it keep you on the road, but it'll also improve how your bike handles, so setting the sag is a total win. You'll have to come back and reset it over time as your suspension wears out, so just check it once at the beginning of each riding season. Lastly, not maintaining your chain is one of the quickest ways to cause a life-threatening problem. Why? Well, because it's a metal thing rubbing up against another metal thing, rotating at high speeds with a lot of power going through it. Even on a beginner bike, chains can wear out pretty quickly if you don't maintain the chain. Look, I know it sucks. You basically need to clean your chain once a weekend if you do big rides or off-road riding, and clean the chain is a boring and thankless job. But if you don't want to do chain maintenance, you should just get a shaft or a belt-driven bike. Chain failure can send the chain into your engine or transmission case, then it can slam the chain into your leg, or the chain can get bunched up under your chain guard and instantly lock up your wheel at high speeds. Some things to look for when you're working on the chain are kinked or frozen links, too much or too little slack, weird slack in different places, side-to-side play, or even a sprocket out of alignment. All those things can wear a chain out mid-ride. If you notice any of these problems and you can't fix it by adjusting your rear wheel, just replace the chain and sprockets. You'll probably notice some better power delivery, less throttle lash, and stay alive a little longer. All good things. Fact: the mobile phone throwing world championships are held in Finland. A recent winner said he prepared for the event by mainly drinking. Goodbye.
Oh, hey, you're still here. I can't believe you made it to the end of the video. Not many people do. Just for you, I have a little treat. Hit this link over here. Check out the next video on the Yammie Noob catalog. What's gonna happen in it? I don't really know. Maybe there's a boost in it. Maybe there's some cool wheelies. Maybe there's some fun memes. Probably. Who can say?